Jason won that match against Shane, and Shane's the king, and he went up and stood in his chair. You don't stand in the king's chair.
And we're back. It's been a long time, Demetrius. It's been a really long time, almost a month.
Yeah. It's good to be back. Good morning, everybody in podcast listening world. Appreciate your patience.
Yeah, it's been a long hiatus. We probably could have got a podcast out a little bit earlier this week, but just didn't really seem like it was feasible given all the scheduling conflicts that we had between the two of us. So we're here today, and we're going to be talking about lots of pool. And because it's such a time-sensitive podcast, I'm going to follow along with the very, very little editing and producing. And that way we can get out the context for the match tonight a little bit sooner because Shane and Dennis are starting tonight. So I don't want to be sitting on this podcast because I got a feeling it's going to be a really long one. So while we haven't made a podcast in the last 3 weeks, we are going to make up for it today by having a 3-week-long podcast, basically, right here. Is that exciting?
I don't even know what to say. That sounds like a good time. Let's get started.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna
I've played some pool sessions that feel like that.
Yeah. Well, I hope for your sake that you've had some breaking sessions that have been like that in the last few weeks, and that is not a shots fired.
Oh, not at all. So it sounds like that we might as well dive into the VG10. But first, why don't we? Do you have anything we need to do? Should we do shout outs? Should we? Where do we go? I'm lost. It's been too long.
I know. I feel
the path is overgrown.
I feel like I'm just scrambling in the dark. There are some updates I want to give for the Patreons. We had a couple new Patreons. Thank you very much. I believe I gave this person a shout out last time, but I want to make sure. I want to give a shout out to both John Keep and Brett Snowden. I'm pretty sure I gave them a shout out last episode, but it seems like so long ago that if I didn't, I want to make sure that I get them one because I do, of course, appreciate all of the support. We also have 2 new ones on top of that, which is George Herbert, which I'm pretty sure he's going to be canceling because I'm like a giant asshole to him, and Steve Hall, who is like one of the biggest supporters of the stuff that we've done here. He's bought cues from us. He's bought raffle prizes. He bought like everything at this point to financially support the podcast besides becoming a Patreon. So now he's joined a full circle and done that. And George, every time he enters into one of the raffle prizes, I always end up missing his entries. I don't know why I did it twice during the VG10. He was the only person that I missed the entire event from what I was told. Or nobody else reached out to me saying that I missed theirs, but he did it twice. So now I just feel like a turd, which is a bummer. But what can you do? Don't hate me, George.
Yeah, things happen. You had a lot of moving parts, and you know what they say. I mean, mistakes are going to happen, but what matters is how you respond to them. And I know you got it handled, and that's all anybody can do.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, that's the exact reason why we do the open drawings, so everybody can see everything. So that if something happens and you didn't get your entries in, you can yell at me and we'll make it right somehow. So that's why we do this. For anybody out there that doesn't have Facebook or YouTube or realizes that we just did a massive event, which is why we've been gone for the last 2 weeks, that's what we're talking about. We had a bunch of raffle prizes. So if you didn't know that was happening, you got to get on YouTube, you got to get on Facebook, you got to follow the Queued Up podcast so you can watch what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get there, I got just a couple more things again. I do want to give a shout out to the Patreon. If you want to become a Patreon to the podcast as well, we are making our best effort to do what we can to survive in this industry. So this is a good way of doing it. I know I've had a couple people reach out to me after the VG10 that were not podcast listeners, and they actually went through and started listening to some of the podcasts and are like, you know, what you do is amazing, and we want to support it. How can we do it? And I directed them over to the Patreon, basically, because that's really the best way of doing it. even if it's only a couple bucks a month or $1 or $2 a month or whatever it is, that is planned income that I can work on basically building a financial future around. So it's always a weird thing talking about stuff like this, but you know, what can you do? So this is going to be the best way of support for the people who are looking to help support the podcast. All right. Other than that, let's move on from there because I've beaten that dead horse. The VG10 prizes. If you participated in any of those and you got prizes and you did not receive them, please reach out to me because all of the packages will be shipped out as of this morning. So if something weird happens and you don't get your package, let me know. I'm keeping all the receipts, obviously. I'll have tracking on it. And just reach out to me and we'll see what happened. And then lastly, t-shirts. I ordered 140 more t-shirts and I made them all up yesterday. It took just shy of 6 hours, but we have lots of t-shirts. So if you would like a t-shirt, reach out to me via the Facebook podcast page or, I don't know, the website, and just basically order one, and I will get it sent out to you this week because that's, I don't know, what I do, and everybody likes t-shirts. So, all right, that's, I think, all I have to do in the beginning. If I have anything more, I'll just add it later on afterwards. But, Demetrius, let's do shout-outs. Go ahead.
Well, I got to shout out. There's so many people I could shout out to, but you know what? I'm going to go with Little Chris. For those that don't know, Little Chris has made some great YouTube instructional content. He's been on our podcast. He's also, we've actually had a chance to partner with him on a couple of his video reviews, and we're going to be doing a few more. So looking forward to it. But I'm excited because Little Chris is going to be coming up and staying, bringing in the new year. So it's a little ways out, a couple months out, but at the end of the year, he's going to be coming up from Texas, and we're going to get together and be doing some pool training. And then we're also going to be maybe doing some other fun stuff while he's up here. There's discussions of maybe some type of challenge match that we do. And of course, we're the invite for you to come up and join us, especially as we come down to the new year and bring in the new year. I think we're going to have a good time. So we're going to be doing, we might make a few appearances at some local pool halls, hang out, meet some people, make a few videos, do some pool training, and probably do some challenge matches too. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but that's something to look forward to. So I'm glad he's making the trip. No better time to come to Minnesota than the dead of winter.
I'm going to be there too, turd.
Yeah, well, I didn't know if you're. Anyway, we can talk about that. I didn't know exactly when you're going to be joining. But anyway, we'll talk about it. So
I figured I'd come up on New Year's Eve, maybe bring up and make a weekend out of. So if you really hate your life and you're not from Minnesota, you can fly into Minnesota and you can hang out with all three of us, maybe. How much fun does that sound like? It's
going to be a full house, I think. But one thing while I'm on the topic though, I've been doing really well. So I guess I got to thank all the people that have come out and trained. It's going really, really well. Right now I don't want anyone to ever be afraid of Minnesota winters. So in the end, people come out and train. I mean, you don't have to worry about the temperature. Don't wait until May to come train here because I pick people up at the airport, pull them into my garage. We train inside all 3 days. It's not really an issue. Now that said, there is an update on availability with the 3-day boot camp trainings. I am booked basically until the middle of February, which is great. Things are picking up since this, the things slowed down a little bit with the initial hesitation on travel, but things are going really well. But I'd say that to people because if you're making plans, just understand it's plan a little ways out. I want to make sure I'm available for people and stuff. So really appreciate all the support and all the people that have made the trip out and trained. It's been a ton of fun. And, January is a busy month with Turning Stone and Derby, possibly Derby City. So other than that, though, I'd love to keep getting these things on the calendar. So don't be afraid of the Minnesota winters. And if you do want to make a trip out here, just make sure you plan ahead a little bit because it is starting to, as word gets out, it's starting to get a little bit further out. So very good.
Yeah. I am going to cheat and give a huge shout out to a bunch of people here. I'm going to shout out to all the sponsors to the VG10. I'm going to try to come up with them off the top of my head, which is not going to work out very well, but I'm going to try it anyways. Of course, our title sponsor, was Poison Cues. The price tag on that was pretty high, so I really do appreciate Poison Cues for your support for the event. The playoff sponsor, which is also a pretty big price tag, was Q-Tech Cues. I play with Q-Tech Cues. I'm very happy to be sponsored by Q-Tech Cues. It was an absolute treat to get to call it the Q-Tech Cues and the Poison VG10. So those were the two huge sponsors for the event. I really, really appreciated that. And then along the way, we had Simonis. We had Arcos balls. We had Fast and Loose designs. We had How pool cues and How tips. We had Go Customs. We had Ride the Nine Virtual Tour. And we had Jacoby Custom Cues. Oh, that worked out pretty well. I remember those. I'm kind of proud of myself. So, of course, the people that support the podcast and the industry more broadly, because, of course, it doesn't have to just be the podcast, these are the people that are keeping pool going around the industry. They are more than willing to get their money behind events, and they are more than willing to help the game grow by supporting future content. So, those are the... I mean, I'm not going to say let's boycott the rest of them, but let's try to give an extra little boost to the companies that are actually giving back to the game and helping it grow, not just taking their profits and taking their ball elsewhere and playing. I have a lot of problems with companies like that in the industry, and if you really wanted me to get on a rant, find me at the Moscone Cup sometime or find me at a pool tournament and get me drunk, and I will rant like crazy about a couple of really, really bad promoters in this industry.
It's like the thing when I was at the U.S. Open one year and I was outside. Anyway, Earl was outside smoking a cigarette. I walked up to him and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I started a conversation where in the first opening exchanges I brought up something about jump cues, and I brought up something about like the dead ball on the break, and I was just steering the conversation. I was just trying to put coins in and see if I could kind of let him get going, and he never did, man. I was really let down. I could just troll him a little. I mean, okay, I'm a little ashamed of myself. I just couldn't help it. So anyway, just do that to Nate. Walk up and just start asking about like, pool support and sponsors in the industry. You'll try to wind them up a little bit.
Yeah, that gets me fired up in a hurry. So. I don't know. I guess that's probably it, isn't it? I want to give a huge shout out to those guys, those promoters, those sponsors, those people, and that's really all I guess I have in the beginning. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about before we get started?
No, we could dive right in. VG10, baby. Good job, Nate. Seriously, good job.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, normally
I'll just tell people, for those that don't know, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure not everybody, you've been so deep in this that it's, I just want to make sure there are some people that might not know. So what he did is in the middle of this thing where nobody's playing tournaments, there's nothing, no high level competition or very little. And that's starting to change, which we'll get to. But Nate took advantage and said, hey, we need somebody to put together something big, a big competition here. And it's a challenge, man, because you've got what he wanted to do is put together a virtual tournament for pros, like people can go on, play the Ghost on their home tables and play. And so what this involves is coordinating dozens of pro players from across the globe with different languages, different time zones, and different preferences, and then trying to get them together to play some type of competition where they all have to have their own table and multiple cameras and technology and coordinating. You know what? I don't even know that we have time to talk about if we took the time to explain what it took to put this thing together, we would then eat up all the time to talk about what happened. But for the listeners that don't know, the end result was that there was 28 players that played a $500 entry as a real tournament with money added, good sponsors, good payouts. I believe it was, and I'll let you, I thought it was 6,000 for first or somewhere around there. I might be misremembering, but the point is that people were competing. They'd play heads up matches with a 10-ball Ghost, and then play round robin early brackets, 7 groups of 4. People, the final certain number advanced. I think it was 12, and then it played single elimination heads up matches until it came down to the finals. And so it was really, really cool to get a chance to see world-class competition playing for real money again. We haven't seen that in a tournament structure for a while. And so Nate put it together. It was a massive undertaking. And so that's what we're talking about with the VG10. So go ahead.
Yeah, it was fun. And by fun, I mean it was like a week and a half of torture. But there's another one. If you really want to get the goods, get me drunk sometime and just ask me how. I think Demetrius, you kind of describe it the best. You're herding cats, getting professional players to do things, and some are really, really, really cool. I mean, I'm telling you what, like Nick Malai, Wojtek Szewczyk, like these are some of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. They're like just super cool dudes that you can hang out with at, a Friday night at the U.S. Open and just have a great time talking about absolutely nothing besides pool, or nothing including. I mean, you could talk about literally anything. They're just really cool, genuine human beings. And then you have players like Beep and Beep that are just absolutely torture to work with, and like it's crazy to think that they would ever get anybody to want to sponsor them or work with them in the middle of anything. So, of course, get me drunk sometime, and you can find out all the players that I like and all the players that I hate based off of just working.
We should do that. That'd be if we ever get tired of doing the podcast and you decide to retire from pool.
Let's just grenade everything.
We should just go out style.
Yeah. That's a great idea. Let's just drop an atomic bomb and get the heck out of Dodge. That's a great one.
That's what I think.
Just start
That'd
torching the
Okay,
industry.
so talking about the VG10. Okay, so let's start with what happened in terms of how it went down, in terms of who rose to the challenge and who was able to play well. Why don't you take the lead on that?
Well, of course, we got to start with Albin Ocean because he won the event and he played. I'm not going to say flawlessly all the way through because he actually missed a decent amount of balls in the last few matches, but he gave himself so many opportunities that even when he was missing balls, I mean, he never broke dry. He never got the ball kicked in. So I mean, I was incredibly impressed with how he played, especially his break. Like his break is His break is really good. Of course, second place goes to Tyler Styer. Punched a little bit above his weight there, but it shouldn't be a huge surprise with how good his break is. Once you get that ball in hand, I mean, really it's just a matter of just running out at that point in time. And with the layouts that he had, I mean, they're not bad. They were not bad.
Yeah.
And then, of course, third, fourth is a tie between Nick Malai and Fedor Gorst. Nick falling to Albin and Fedor falling to Tyler, which probably was the best match of the entire tournament, to be honest with you. And then I guess 5th through 8th goes to Denis Grabe, Alexander Kazakis. I'm actually blanking on who the rest of them were now. It was
Danny Olson finished pretty good. I know Danny did all right.
Danny finished.
And Jim Telfer.
Jim Telfer finished 5th through 8th. Yeah, Danny Olson finished.
Was it 9?
9 through 12th. Yeah. I'll get a.
Okay, well we'll go there. That's like we got a good overview, and so one thing I kind of want to let the audience know that might not have seen it. So the format, it was 10 ball post. However, there was one modification, which is a big one, which is that it had to be a legal break with a ball pocketed, meaning if you scratched in the break, then that was a loss, and if you come up dry in the break, that was a loss. So that's kind of a unique rule as far as. I haven't seen the goals played that way before. Obviously, it made a big impact on me, on a number of players. But where did that rule originate? What was the thinking behind that? And because it, good or bad, it changed the game. Where did that come from? What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, for sure. So, this was all, and actually, I have the bracket here finally. So let me just really quickly run off. 5th through 8th is Denis Grabe, Jim Telfer, Alex Kazakis, and Wojtek Szewczyk, and then 9 through 12th was Danny Olson, Kelly Fisher, Nayuki Oi, and Roberto Gomez. So, all right. But back to your question. The way that we looked at this is a professional pool player event. This was never about the amateur. This was never for the amateurs. A couple of amateurs played in it, and we were happy to have them. But really, this was a professional event. And what do you have to do as a bare minimum for a professional pool player is to break the balls and make a ball. You can't control a rack and win a rack if you don't get to the table first, right? So that's the bare minimum of what we wanted it to be. So from there, we're thinking, how do we make it so that it's not just one big breaking competition? Because in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to throw any other of the streamers under the bus, but I think that there's a lot of promoters that are doing these virtual things that are just basically making it a breaking competition, right? It comes down to, well, do you get bonus points for taking ball in hand? Well, who are the people that are going to be taking ball in hand? They're the people who need to take ball in hand because their break isn't that good. Who are the people that are breaking and having a shot on the one every single time? Well, it's the best breakers in the world. So you're basically filtering out from start to finish these bonus points towards people that are inherently better at breaking than others. So it just becomes a breaking competition. We didn't want it to be a breaking competition. So how do we level the playing field from there? Well, if you shoot the ball straighter than your peers, and you can just make a ball as a bare minimum, you're put on the same basically the same playing field. Of course, if you could break 3 balls in, you're playing 7 ball instead of 9 ball, but you're at least getting a ball in hand with the same opportunity to score the same amount of points as your opponent won. So that's really why we wanted to do that type of format. It's the bare minimum without giving too much towards everybody else. Basically rewarding a bigger break than your peers, or at least that's what we thought. So that's kind of the motivation for that one.
Understood. Yeah, I think in terms of ghost competitions, it's really interesting to see how it changes because we can structure it. You can get pro players and you can make it a pro, tournament and double elimination bracket or round robin with single elimination bracket. I mean, you can run it, but it's not just it's not bad. It's just people have to understand it's not 10 ball. It's a little different. It's a test of pool skill, but it's not the same as a 10 ball tournament. And so as long as you understand that, then it's exciting and fun and awesome. The thing about the breaking requirements in this format, even if the ball wasn't required on the break, it is a huge deal. I mean, if you're playing the 10 ball ghost, the break shot is very, very important because even if you're not making a requirement to make a ball in the break, if you break the balls poorly and you have 10 balls on the table and they're not and you're not spreading right and they're having weird clusters and tying up on weird rails and you have weird transitions, versus if you can spread the ball, make 1 to 3 balls and float them all apart. I've gone on record of saying that playing the ghost, the break shot is probably 100-point Fargo. Like if you break the balls really, really well in 10 ball and you pocket 2 balls a break and spread them apart, beating the 10 ball ghost on normal slidey equipment with regular size pockets, it might be, at that point you're almost playing the 8 ball. It might be like a 650 Fargo. Whereas if you're coming up dry and having 10 ball layouts with balls that are laying funny, that might require 750 Fargo to beat the ghost. It's probably 100-point difference. And so I think that the break is already a pivotal shot, even without the requirement of pocketing a ball. And then it's funny because we can talk about how that played out because it seems like, well, pocketing a ball, the 10 ball break, magic rack, balls go at the side. It shouldn't be that big of a difference. But it turned out that for some of us it was, and so it's interesting, and the people like Alvin that did really well and Tyler who made the finals. It just shows how important. And so again, this is not a 10-ball tournament, but it does show how much skill there is in the break and how important that shot is in any format. Even if you didn't have that requirement, honestly, even if you didn't have that breaking requirement, I'm not sure it would have played out a lot different because the better breakers are still at a huge advantage there.
Yeah. The only difference is, the reason why we figured we had to have it is I feel like it's actually a disadvantage to the lesser players. So I got a little bit of pushback from kind of the shortstop level players like, well, I'd be able to hang with these guys as long as, I could make a ball in the break. And I mean, you got to entertain it. You got to let them have that, but it's not, I don't think it's true. I mean, if you could shoot the balls as straight as they would, you would be a lot higher than you are. Like you're not, your poor break is not going to be worth 70 Fargo points, right? Now, of course you're playing against the ghost, you're not playing against your peers, but the idea, if you gave Fedor Gorst the opportunity to never have to make a ball, I'm telling you what, that kid will probably go the entire tournament missing 2 balls. or missing like 2 opportunities at points. I mean, he is
you're not gonna
miss.
a shortstop's not gonna. It might be easier for the shortstop, but it's not gonna be it's not gonna be any easier for them to beat a guy that runs out 9 out of 9 racks. You know what I mean?
Every single time, right?
Right.
And Albin Ocean the same way. Alex Kazakis especially the same way, because we saw basically Alex lost his matches because he couldn't consistently pocket a ball on the break, but he barely ever missed any shots, and he was making crazy tough transitions along the way too. So it's a shortstop is still going to miss some balls from time to time, and those pros just are never going to miss them. So
yeah, and I feel like I'm skirting around it, so I want to talk about my performance and get that out of the way, and then Phil's. It's really interesting. So for those that don't know, I participated in this event, and I absolutely did not even generate opportunities off the break. It was actually very strange because I won. I ran out almost 0 racks out of. I had like 27 at bats, and I probably only had like out of 27 breaks, I might have only given myself
times.
like 7 or 8 chances as far as pocketing balls. It was pretty dismal. And what's interesting about that is that to explain it, like how could that happen? I was trying to tell people, like, it's really tough because you've got a lot of pressure when it's hard to explain how much pressure there is. So the break shot is not one of my strengths. And then when you put together a contest where the break shot is probably the most, it wasn't a breaking contest because here's the thing. Amongst the players who have a devastating break, then it's like a kicker in poker. It's like if everybody has ace jack and ace king and ace 10, well, then it's not just like who has the highest card, it's who has the best kicker. Okay, but if you don't have an ace, you're not going to win, you know? So you need to have the ace in your hand. And then if everybody has, amongst the people that have the ace, then it is decided by who has the best kicker. And the break is the high card. You have to have that break. And then amongst the people that have the break, then it comes down to who can keep their composure, who can run the balls the best, shot making patterns, cue ball speed, being present, being engaged. And so I don't want people to think that it's just a breaking contest. But amongst the people that don't have an effective, consistent, reliable break, then those people can't qualify. So that's the category I was in. And so when you know that, when you're playing people that are really, really, really effective on the break and generating a lot of opportunities, and they play better after the break, you know that if you break dry and don't give yourself chances, that you're not going to have a chance. You don't have a chance in the match. And then you're up there and you flip on the camera and you got thousands of people watching, and now's your chance. And it's like it's just this weird shot. And I tell you, it's like putting 10,000 square pounds of pressure on the weakest part of your game, visibly against top competition. You get this chance right now. And I'll tell you, it'll expose your weaknesses. It's like turning on an ultraviolet light and just being like, okay, what you got? So the fact is, I couldn't handle it. I was not up to the challenge. I tried to prepare, was ineffective. And it was a little, I was only disappointed because of, it didn't make it as entertaining for my matches for the people that might've been watching or rooting on. But that's what happened to me is I barely gave myself opportunities. And then of course, when you're not giving yourself any scoring opportunities, you finally get a shot. It's very, very difficult to convert. And again, because of the same reasons, the spreads are a little bit worse. You're hopelessly out of the match. It's not a good place to play from. So that's what happened to me. And it just shows though, how important a shot is. And I think a lot of people fall in this category because, a lot of people are like me. They grew up playing pool, whether it was in the 80s or for me, I grew up kind of playing in the 90s with kind of a hit them hard and spread them out. And now things evolved. And when we watch 10 ball, it's just amazing how the people that we see do well, they've all got well-developed breaks. But there's a lot of guys out there that don't have that 10 ball breakdown. And whether it's a ghost challenge or a 10 ball tournament, it's pretty important. So that's kind of where I was at, and that's how that played out. So any comments there?
Well, yeah, I would just say there was several players that had the same kind of struggles that you were, and they were all kind of in that same tier that you're in, as far as like not quite the top level of player, but certainly you separated yourself from like that next tier of amateur players. Joseph Korsiak comes to mind right away. He couldn't make a ball on the break either. I think he ended up having close to 20 dry breaks himself. and he got a little bit frustrated with the format, and he was one of the people up by the end of it. They wanted to have just an all of, you get a shot at the table no matter what for maybe half a point or something like that. And that's part of the magic, I think, of the way that we did our format. Was it's just simple. It's, you watch it for 5 minutes, you've never heard of Cue It Up before, you've never heard of the VG10 before, and you tune in for 3 minutes, and if you're a fully functioning human being, you can come up with what the heck's going on pretty quickly, right? It's not, well, why did that person get 5 points here, and why did they get 6 points over here, and blah, 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 blah. It's a very simple, but in my mind, exciting format, at least as far as Virtual Ghost can be. So
yeah, I think I support it. Again, it's like your point. If you didn't make a ball in the break requirement, the people that came up dry, they're not going to be running the 10 balls with cluster tables against any better than Federer's running out his 8-ball runs. It doesn't make any sense. I can understand, I get where the guy's coming from, because I felt it too, which is like, it would have been nice to at least get to shoot, to show up and not even be able to shoot balls, and then be railed and be effectively shut out of the match by the time you start getting opportunities.
It's a
but you know what? Here's the thing. This is a pro tournament, guys. And guess what? If you fly down to the International Open and you play a winner break race to 11 9-ball and you draw Sky Woodward and you make an error or two because you're settling into the match at 0-0 and you're a little nervous and you dog a ball or two, you can find yourself down 8-0 real fast and feel the same way, which is like, I didn't even get to shoot. It would have been nice. It's like, guess what? This is not bowling. This is not golf. We're not taking turns here. This is not patty cake. Like, the guys are trying to shut you down and take the match away. And if you want to play pro competition, like, I'll tell you, I've seen it happen enough. You fly out there and you're like, I'm going to get chances. I hope I do well. I hope I play good. I get comfortable, settle in, and get, like most people are used to kind of getting some chances and settling in and taking turns at the table. That's just not how the pros play, man. It's like a lot of times you don't get chances at the table. And if you blink and if you fumble and if you it's just really, really fast that you can find yourself shut down. And so for those that haven't gone through it, that's what it's like.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay. I guess, I don't know. Is there really anything else we need to discuss as far as this? Did you have any more questions for me?
No, I'll just add one thing for people that want to know. So I have, of course, grown from this experience. It was a really, really, really eye-opening. I've always been able to work around I've worked on my 10-ball break, okay, but I've also been able to work around it to some extent. In this format, it was impossible to work around. And so I have had some practice breaking since then. And here's the only thing that I've kind of a couple things that I'll take away just for anybody that's working on their break. So the things that have helped me since over the last few weeks now is I was a little bit too worried about there's only two things, accuracy and timing. Those are the two things, accuracy and timing. So I'll tell you things I shouldn't worry about are where the balls are going exactly. Like I was worried a little bit about where the 4-5 were going and, the two balls up front. I was worried a little bit about where my tip placement is, if I need to come up higher or lower to try to get those balls to track different. But the fact is, and those things, I'm not saying those things don't matter. Maybe you have to find a spot that works or move your cue ball around a little bit or try a couple different tip positions. Maybe there's some spot, but really what I was finding is I had spots where in between matches, I'd be breaking in balls. And then during the match, I wouldn't be breaking in balls. And so I was like, what's changing? And it wasn't my tip position. It turns out for me that if I can get the hit full and if I can get the timing right, I want to just talk about the timing for 1 second, that the balls would go different. Like they would track differently. And so I've been thinking about it here's a trivia question for you. Which is the first man-made invention that broke the sound barrier?
The first man-made invention, probably like a bullet would be my guess.
Okay, so it turns out, this is a great trivia question, because it turns out it's been around for thousands of years, is the bullwhip. So the whip that's why the whip cracks like it does, because it's got this, the whip, it gets from thicker to thinner at the tip. And with the right snap of the wrist, that ripples down the whip, and it gets moving so quickly that it breaks the sound barrier. Just totally crazy. And so if you take that whip and you just swing it around, it's not going to move very fast. But if you get the timing right, it breaks the sound barrier. And that's what I've kind of realized with the break, I think that my timing wasn't good. If you try to muscle the break, if you're trying to hit it hard, if you're trying to, explode the rack, what happens is you tighten up those muscles in your arm and you don't let your cues accelerate and swing naturally. You're like shoving it forward or you're muscling it forward. And it would be like trying to take a baseball bat and like just shove it at a ball and hit a home run. It's like, no, you have to let that thing swing and pick up speed of its own natural swing. And so what I've been doing is with the break is I've really calmed it down. And so and you showed me this when we were doing jump shots too, is that you can shoot jump shots the same way where you don't have to like come back and forth and snap. Like you can come back to a nice calm hang and then accelerate smoothly forward. And that helped my jump shots too. But definitely on the break, just the timing of the break and letting the cue accelerate with a swing as opposed to a muscle jam, like just that I started getting my timing a little bit better, and the racks, even though I didn't feel like I was hitting them any different, I felt like I was hitting them maybe even softer, the same speed. But there's a certain timing where the rack just reacts totally differently than if you spear at the ball really hard. And so during that tournament, I felt like I was spearing at the balls really hard, and I wasn't getting good action, and the balls were not tracking where they were supposed to. And then then when I started getting the timing right, I was making 2-3 balls. I even made 5 balls on the break. It felt really good. So it's like totally different. And it's funny because one of the things that was a struggle is under a lot of pressure, it's really hard to use a nice relaxed timing when you're like, I need to make a ball right now. But that's what it is. Accuracy and timing. Those are the two things that seem to be the biggest areas to focus on. So just thought I'd share a little tip for people that are like me trying to retool for the 2020s.
For sure. So why don't we leave that there, and we will talk about the other event that happened this past week. And that other event that happened this past week was the Tyler Styer and Jesus Atencio 10-ball matchup, where Jesus was getting the call 9-ball in a race to 100. Now, did you watch any of this first off?
I did. It was thrilling.
Yeah, I watched the first 2 days of it. I wasn't able to watch the last day, and I could have. I just didn't like the idea that this was like the first time that I actually felt like a friendship got in the way of me really being able to sweat a match. I didn't have any money on it. I wasn't trying to bet it. I just know that I didn't like the idea that I thought Tyler was going to lose on the last day. And so I didn't really want to watch it because Tyler's a good friend of mine. So I felt really weird trying to watch it. And I'm sitting here constantly cringing every time I saw something bad happen for Tyler. And it just started compounding. And I ended up turning off the match at about 92 to 91. Tyler had just gotten to, it was 92 to 88. And I think Tyler had just he won 3 straight to get to 92 to 91, and I think Tyler broke dry or broke and scratched or something like that. Had a weird kick.
Yeah, or he pushed out funny or something. Yeah.
It was something, and I'm like, oh crap, Tyler just lost this match, and I turned it off. And at that point in time, somebody reached out to me like 15 minutes afterwards, and they're like, oh my god, I can't believe how good this match is, and I'm like, don't care, leave me alone, I'm going to bed. They're like, well, you're not going to watch this?
Just to let the audience know. So in the end, the game was Tyler Styer playing Jesus Atencio, race to 100 and 10 ball. And Jesus was getting the 9 ball as a spot because Tyler's a little bit more established, a little higher rated. So he was giving Jesus the 9 ball. The end result, I believe it was 100 to 94 Jesus. And this is one of the few races to 100 that was like kind of what everybody hopes to see. I shouldn't say everybody, the people betting and pulling, don't want to see that. But I mean, in terms of like people's complaints about races to 100 sometimes, you know who's going to win right away. And it's just not really suspenseful. But let me tell you, matches like this are very suspenseful. So anyway, that was the end outcome.
Going along that a little bit more. Tyler was up at one point in time in day 1 by 12 games. He ended up closing the day out at, what did they play to, 33? Was that right? I think they played to 33. And Tyler ended up winning the day 33 to 27. So he ended up having a 12-game lead in the beginning, losing it down to 6, and then closing the day out. So I guess technically at 5 at one point in time, because if he's going to win the last day of the game, or a last game of the day, he had to have obviously been up 5 to get up to +6. Anyways, whatever. So then the second day, actually, Jesus won the second day, and Tyler struggled most of the day. I believe Tyler was down 8 games going into day 3. So like a 66-58, something like that. Tyler comes roaring out, and I believe wins like 21 of the first 27 games or something like that.
It was unbelievable. The rally on day 3 was so amazing. Yeah.
To take a small lead, I think he was up 77-76, and then the drama happened, which we'll probably talk about here in a second, because I think it was just absolutely silly. But this is kind of what we're going to talk about. And then, of course, at that point in time, once that happened, I honestly thought that Tyler had no chance of winning anymore. I shouldn't say no chance of winning, but I thought he was going to lose from there. And we can talk about why afterwards. But yes, basically it goes back and forth where Jesus gets up 4 games, Tyler comes back and ties it up. Jesus gets up 4 games, Tyler comes back and ties it up. And then eventually Jesus gets up 4 games, and it's kind of the 98-94, and at that point in time, it's like it takes a lot to be able to really come back, tie that match up, and win from there. So,
yeah, I think what I want to do, I want to talk about the ending, and then I have some questions about the middle. So let me tell you, because I've only got a couple comments to make, and one of them has to do with the ending of this match. The ending of this match was stunning. So if you guys go and want to look at this, find day 3, Tyler versus Jesus, day 3, part 2, because they had a dinner break. And I was watching from before the break. But around the dinner break, I want to say it was around 89, 88, somewhere around there. And from that point on, like if you just watch the second half of day 3, it was just stunning. And here's the way it played out is, to your point, I know that it got to a point where it was very close, around 90. I think Jesus was always up a game. But here's all day 3, Jesus had a 4-game lead. And every time Tyler started to bring the 4-game lead, he'd close it at 2 or 1 games. Jesus would get a shot and run 2 or 3 racks and get it right back to 4 games. Tyler would get it down to where he was only down 2 racks, and he'd scratch and, boom, back to 4-game lead again. And then he'd get it close, and then he'd have to push it out, and Jesus would make a hero shot and run a couple racks, and boom, 4-game lead. It was like that seemed to be the way it was, as Tyler was trying to close up this 4-game lead, and Jesus kept re-extending it to 4 games. And that happened all the way down through the end of the match. So at the end of the match, it was like, 92 to 89 or something, and Tyler gets into like 91 to 92 and then makes a slip, and then boom, Jesus goes to 94. Now here's where I'm very, very clear. At 94 to 91, Jesus, Tyler let Jesus to the table, and Jesus made a great shot and ran 3 racks to go up 97-91. And then at 97-91, Jesus missed a 5-ball trying to draw to the end rail with spin, and it was the only shot that he missed that was like a makeable ball. Now, he missed a ball somewhere on a push out where he pushed out to some length of the table, pinch bank on the 1 ball that he kind of missed earlier. So if you want to count a length of the table bank with kind of a 2-way built in as a miss, then you can count that as a miss. But I'm telling you, if you watch the second half of day 3, the only ball Jesus missed after even an hour before that was this 1 5-ball. He was up 97-91, and it was like 3 hours of watching him string 10-ball racks, and he finally missed this 5-ball. And at 97-91, it felt like Tyler was so beat. He tried to rally. He finally, it's like it just looks like he's toast, and Tyler gets up there and makes a tricky run out, and then breaks and runs 2 more racks to get from 97-91 to 97-94. And he just gets up and runs 3 racks to get to 94 and stares at Jesus. And it's like, I'm not just going like, I'm going to come back. I can win this match. Here's where I win. And then Tyler let Jesus to the table with a very difficult 1-ball with very difficult shape on a very difficult 3-8 combination. And Jesus just calmly makes this 1-ball, makes this length of the table 3-8 combination, and runs 3 racks and out to beat him 100-94. And so that's the way the final day went. It was like they took turns running 3 racks on each other, and every time Jesus did it, it felt like, well, now is when Tyler crumbles. And then when Tyler would not crumble and rise to the occasion and run 3 racks back and stare at Jesus, I'm like, well, that's where, wow, now it's really hard. Because even when you're that close to the finish line, there's so much work. I know it's like 91, 94. It sounds like they're almost to the finish line, but there's so many racks left to be made. There's still, at that point, everything slows down, and there's so many hard shots and so many tricky transitions and so many things that need to be done that if you blink and waver at all, the other guy's going to take it away from you. And neither one of them did. They pushed each other to higher and higher levels. And people are, if you watch that last day 3, I'll tell you, we'll talk about where they stand in terms of the pool world. But I haven't seen any better 10 ball than what these two gentlemen played on the second half of day 3. It was stunning. So,
yeah. Sorry to clear my throat there. So, yeah, of course, it's about as good as it can get. If Tyler wasn't a friend of mine, I would not have been watching it. Or I would have been watching it from start to finish. Tyler's a great friend. I just got to the point where I just couldn't watch it anymore. And that was at like 91 to 92, I believe is when it was. That is just, I know the match, and I didn't want to watch it because I was sweating it and I just wasn't a fan. But anyways, let's talk about the drama. I believe it happened at 77-76. And this is essentially what happens is, and Jesus is using Kamui Chalk. Tyler's using Teom Chalk. Anybody who uses Kamui Chalk kind of knows that on big contacts, it kind of splats on the cue ball. And splat might not be the most scientific word, but if you envision what a splat looks like, it literally looks like a piece of slime just slamming up against your car window when you're driving down the highway at 7,000 miles an hour. And every time that this happens, Tyler, of course, wants to clean the cue ball off because, well, you don't want to have a skid. So throughout the course of day 1, 2, and 3, Tyler was cleaning the cue ball basically whenever he needed to for a shot. And Carlos, who is Jesus's backer in the match, doesn't like it. And I think Jesus doesn't like it either. And I think, according to them, Jesus doesn't speak English very well, and he wanted Carlos to basically confront Tyler and tell Tyler to stop just grabbing the cue ball and moving it. And Carlos then basically said, well, let me finish out here. Tyler says, I'm going to clean the cue ball whenever I want, because that's his right as a player. Okay. Carlos is saying, you're not a referee. This is not a tournament. This is gambling. You can't do that. You can only do that in a tournament. They end up having a little bit of an argument about it, and eventually it turns out that Hunter Lombardo, who's there with Tyler, is there basically cleaning the ball whenever either player wants it done. Now, before we really start talking about what we think of this entire situation, because of course this took the pool world by storm for about 2 minutes. It was handled pretty correctly by Tyler and Jesus, I thought. I thought that they both handled it about as well as they could have. Tyler ends up leaving the room after... Tyler said one thing that he said to Carlos, your boy's in trouble and you know it, and this is you just trying to make a power play. Something like that. Your boy's in trouble and you know it, and that's what you're trying to do here. And Jesus, of course, doesn't really say anything along the way. He just kind of sits there and lets Carlos talk for him. No problem at all. I thought the players handled it pretty well along the way. Now, before I hand this off to you, Demetrius, what do we think about the situation? Both in, let's start with in a sense of the actual action itself. Do you think you should be able to just clean the balls whenever you want?
Well, I just want to add one detail. Is I think one of the things that escalated the situation is the frequency, and also the fact that in the beginning, from what I understand, was Tyler was like looking over at Jesus and kind of getting acknowledgement, like, "Hey, so okay if I clean this thing?" And then it was happening so often that Tyler just started picking up the cue ball and cleaning it off and putting it back down. And when you're starting to do that without acknowledgement, or you're doing it like, when you start doing it, I mean, this was happening, just for people that were wondering, once a rack. Like basically every time that Jesus shot and Tyler got back to the table, he would then need to clean the cue ball. And I shouldn't say every time, but every time Jesus broke and then Tyler got to the table, and got control of the table, he'd want it clean. Yep. So it was happening on average. Once a rack that Tyler shot after Jesus it was happening.
Yeah, and that's an important distinction. Let me jump in real quick. Because Carlos gets one of the things that Carlos got mad about was that Tyler did it less frequently on day one than he did on the rest of the days. And that makes sense with exactly what you just said, because Jesus wasn't breaking the balls on day one because he wasn't winning any games. Tyler was kind of running out from everywhere and had a pretty good control on day one, so Jesus isn't getting to the table nearly as often to need to clean the cue ball. So that's an important distinction to make on day one and day two. So Tyler's cleaning the ball less because he's breaking the ball. Jesus is breaking the balls less. Plus, he was acknowledging, kind of looking over and saying, hey, is this okay? And on day one and day two. And then eventually you get to the point where, well, they've never had a problem with it yet. Why am I checking every single time? Anyways, I'm not making excuses for Tyler, but that's an important distinction that Carlos brought up during the argument, was you weren't doing this on day one when you were winning.
Well, and I think another thing that led to the increase in frequency, and I didn't get to see the entire match, so I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I think that in the beginning, when a guy's chalking up the cue ball and it's like kind of, you don't like it, you're like, well, how big of a deal really is this? I'm going to pick my battles. I'm not going to sit here and clean the cue ball every shot. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I'll just kind of deal with it. But then after, like, it's impacting your play, or you have a couple skids, or you have if it's distracting you and it's on your mind, and all of a sudden you see your lead get evaporated and you're in a fight for your life, and you're like, wait a second, this could cost me the set. Like, I am going to pick my battles here. And so this is an interesting situation where I'm actually – I understand that when you're a competitor, if you're non-confrontational, and I'm a non-confrontational person, if you're a non-confrontational person, you will get eaten up in the pool world because there are people that are going to run you over. And it doesn't mean that it has to be because they're bulldozers, but situations come up to where if you just back down and kind of like, if somebody's like, well, was that a good hit? You're like, yeah, I hit the ball first. Like, well, it looked like you hit the fourth. You're like, yeah, okay, fine. Take the cue ball in hand. I don't want to make a scene. Like, if you just give up ball in hand on every questionable hit and you just shrug and let them have the table, like, it's just you'll get chewed up and spit out, and there's too good of competition. You're going to lose and lose and lose. And I'm not saying so you don't have to be a jerk, but when you feel like something's going to, like, if Tyler feels like this is going to impact his play and cost him the match, then he in some ways is like he needs to stand up for himself. So what the right thing to do is different, but like I endorse the idea that Tyler should not get run over. So it's possible that the escalation in cleanings was because in the beginning he was like, yeah, I don't want to make a fuss about this. But then as he sees that this could be a big deal in the match, he needs to address it because he's trying to win.
Yeah. And this is like the kind of perfect situation. It's like the perfect storm between one of the rare pro pool players that actually use Kamui chalk, and probably the most anal player on the entire tour about cleaning the cue ball and having perfect playing conditions. I mean,
Funny,
Tyler's nickname is, what is it, Mr. 67 Degrees or something like that? I mean, Tyler is a little bit anal about the playing conditions of his table, which it's just kind of funny that I don't know if I can name another professional player that uses Kamui chalk because of the reason that we saw in this match. It just makes huge marks everywhere.
So then the question you asked me is, should it be allowed in gambling? And it's a weird one because I mean, like I said, I grew up gambling and playing in the 90s, and it's like, people would put talcum powder all over the tables, and people, you just kind of played it. The idea of picking up the cue ball, I mean, it's just, I know that John Schmidt with his 626 run and cleaning the cue ball every rack, and people are just like, what is that? Like, totally different than it ever used to be. So it's a little alien. It is something weird about, picking up the cue ball. And so whether or not the cue ball should be allowed to be cleaned in tournament, that's a whole different discussion. In a gambling match, it just seems like one of those things where it seems like the right answer is, I don't want to say you should never be able to pick up the cue ball and have it clean. I also don't want to see it where it's like the guy's picking up the ball every rack. So it seems like it's not a black and white situation. It seems like a guideline that could be abused on either side. Yeah. Where if a guy has a delicate roll shot and he sees that somebody just broke the balls and there's this huge, centimeter diameter chalk mark right on the cue ball, and it's like they're just like, hey, I'm rolling this ball in at a weird soft angle, there's this huge chalk smear, I like it cleaned. Like, I'd be okay with that. But to see it, I think what can be done and what can be allowed can be overdone. So, for example, if he had it, let's just take that to a ridiculous extreme. Suppose he had it cleaned every shot. Like, I don't think you can allow that. You know what I mean? So it's not. I don't have a problem with having the cue ball cleaned. It's the frequency with which you allow it. But then the question is, how do you resolve this? Because if he's using a chalk that's putting marks all over the cue ball, yeah, I can understand that. It's not really. Is it fair to Tyler to make him play with it? And I kind of feel like yes, it is. I kind of feel like, you know what? Yeah, you got to play with the cue ball with the chalk marks on it, because if you're playing a guy that's putting chalk on the cube, that uses that chalk, it'd be different if he had like some scientifically rigged up chalk that was designed to like change the way the cue ball played, and he knew how to play with it, and he was trying to like deliberately use this as some kind of thing that was going to wreck Tyler's day. But that's not it. It's a legitimate mainstream chalk. I don't know. Like, it didn't really seem to impact the play for Jesus. It's not like the balls were skidding everywhere. Yeah, I don't think I didn't see a skid shot. So at some point, you got to say, look, if there's one shot once in a while where the balls are going to roll and you're rolling the ball soft and it's all chalked up, yeah, that's fine. But, so it's a tricky spot. I don't know that it was. I think it was handled pretty well, which is, Tyler did what he needed to do. They didn't let it wreck the match. Tyler didn't take it. Some people think he took it to a super extreme, but, he just took it to the extreme of, that he did, but it wasn't every shot. And the match went on. It was a good show. I don't think it killed the match. I think that Tyler, to do it again, I would have liked to seen him clean the cue ball less and just roll with it a little bit more. But I also admire the fact that you got to kind of stand up for yourself and not get run over and not lose a match because you don't like you don't like something about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the balance between, well, you're both playing with the same playing conditions, and you're both prone to the skidding even if you're using the chalk, and wanting to play with perfect conditions. So it's, of course, it was going to be a struggle. Now I'm gonna jump up on my soapbox, and I'm going to do some criticizing, and I don't know if you want to jump in after this, but just give me a couple minutes here.
Sure.
Jesus does not speak English very well at all. I get that. I understand that. I get why Carlos is there. Carlos should have never been in this room. He should have never been involved with the production. He should have never had a platform to ever be involved with anything happening in this match. You have money in the act. You have money on one of the players. You have money on Jesus. You are clearly a biased person. And when you jump in there and start making accusations towards Tyler, and you start jumping on the commentary and you start blasting him, calling him a little piece of shit kid who shouldn't be allowed to ever play pool and against any of your players ever again, and you go on the live commentary and start talking bad about one of the players because you don't like the way they handle the situation, that should never be allowed ever. Now, let me take a step back and say that Carlos Sanchez does a lot of great things for this industry. He has the backing of a lot of top players. He does a lot of things around the pool world in Texas and in the South more broadly. I am not questioning any of those things. I think that Carlos is a great ambassador for the game of pool. With that being said, you are biased and you are going to have a lot of emotions in this because you have a gamble on it. Roy should never have allowed him to even be in that room, especially commentating an event where you have action on it. That was a blunder by, I believe, Roy. I think Roy kind of just gave up the entire basement for the players, and that's just who Roy is. I mean, Roy is doing everything he can to possibly prop this game up, and I don't fault him for this, but at the same time, this is your production, this is your page, this is your basement. You have to get control of the situation, and allowing Carlos to go on commentary after that entire event happened and just sit there and basically blast Tyler unimpeded, uninterrupted for basically 5 minutes before he eventually left the room. That is ridiculously unprofessional. I do not think Carlos is proud of it. I would like to think that he's not. And that just can't happen. It's a terrible look for pool. It's a terribly unprofessional. And I that really, really turned me off when I saw that, and I heard that he had done that, and it's just a bad look. I feel like I have to say that because it happened, and at some point in time, you and I's job with this podcast is calling balls and strikes. I personally I like Carlos quite a bit. He's always been good to me. We've met a couple times, and we've always had good interactions. But I got to call it like I see it, and that was one of his most unprofessional moments. And you just can't have a backer in the same room as the players in that intimate of a situation with being at the Roy's basement. Tyler doesn't have somebody there basically speaking for him. You got to have a neutral third party that doesn't have skin in the game if you're going to have an interpreter. That's how I feel about that, and I wasn't a fan of seeing that.
Yeah, it was definitely awkward, and then for Carlos to be in the booth, I mean, it's very funny. One of the funniest things I've ever heard was Billy Ann Cardona was doing commentary on a One Pocket match a year or two ago, and it was extremely obvious that he had a vested interest in one of the players, and his commentary turned into it stopped being commentary and it started being like. It was something else. It was very fun to listen to.
It's gambling grievance is what it turns into.
Yeah. It was just I can't even repeat some of the things he said because he'd let out some, it's just some cursing and some like, was he doing that? Come on, they could have done that. That figured to happen, and all this stuff, and it was awesome. So anyway, yeah, and I think part of that was that Hunter, who had been doing commentary, got pulled out of the booth to clean the cue ball, and then it left. But you're right. It happened. Now, so I agree, 100% agreed. You can't put Tyler in that spot. Now, the only other thing I wanted to share about Tyler and about these two players. By the way, I think I have a question for you, but I will say this: they both played great at the end. They played phenomenal pool at the end. Better than I can play it. I mean, Jesus, on my best days when everything's working, I can play a pretty fine game of pool. What Jesus did at the end of day 3. I looked at him like, that's better than I can assemble a pool game. Like, this kid played some really, really, really strong pool, and it had firepower, finesse. I mean, it was confidence, good, smooth, good patterns and good control and good taking every shot seriously, but still nice rhythm and powerful play and accurate. It was really, really, really high level pool that he put on at the end. And I was watching it, and some people, when I saw a lot of the reviews, AZ Billiards and comment section, people were really critical about, him, about Tyler, particularly about Tyler. A lot of people are like, well, he's OCD and he needs to be at a money match. He needs to conserve his energy and he needs to flow and he needs to kind of like, he can't be cleaning the cue ball and he can't be that deliberate. He's overthinking things. He's trying too hard. And people were extremely vocal and disapproving of Tyler's style of play. And I just wanted to explain something to the listeners that I've seen is there's a weird flip. There's a switch that happens. So when you're playing, or if you have a league buddy that's playing, or if your kid is learning pool, you're comparing them to a beginner. And you're saying, you know what? My 12-year-old for a beginner plays pretty good. My 12-year-old for a beginner, they made a good shot. My 12-year-old for a beginner, they held up pretty well and made a nice run. And that goes all the way to leagues. It's like I'm a league player, or for a league player, I just made a pretty good shot. I made a pretty good run. I played pretty good tonight for a league player. And my teammate, you know what? For being an amateur, for being a full-time employee, part-time player, they played pretty good. And somehow when you're an amateur, when you're playing, you're playing for fun, you compare your friends, you compare your children, you compare each other to amateurs. And then you do that even up to a certain level. Jesus, he's a 22-year-old. We haven't seen him play before, so we're comparing him to a good up-and-comer 22-year-old. And we're like, gosh, for being a 22-year-old, that's kind of like, just playing out of some pool room nobody's really seen. He actually plays really good. For being an unknown 22-year-old, he plays really, really good. Look at that. But then Tyler, somehow there's a switch where once people say, okay, now you're a pro, and all of a sudden you get compared to perfect. And it's like, well, for being a pro, I mean, you didn't really have good rhythm. Hey, for being a pro, you didn't really, handle that pressure very well. For being a pro, you sure played bad on day 2. For being a pro, it's like somehow you get done. I call it the shiny shirt. That's what I call it where I come from. You have these people with the shiny shirts with the patches, and all of a sudden they become players. And it's like once somebody gets their shiny shirt, instead of people comparing them to average players and recognizing them for their greatness, people start comparing them to Perfect and Shane and Filler. And, well, I mean, he's not elite. He can't do that. He's not that. And listen, of course he's not Filler. Of course he's got holes in his games. Of course there could be things to be said about what's the right balance between attention on every shot versus the importance of rhythm and confidence and flow. And there's an interesting conversation to be had there another day. But my whole point is the kind of the disdain and the fangs with which I was hearing a lot of this feedback. So there's a lot of conversation to be had about how good Tyler does play and what his best road forward. But here's what I would say. Instead of looking at it like, here's some perfect pool player that's too stupid to know that he should play with rhythm, I'm like, no. Here's a young man who has all the same struggles that you, Mr. Listener, have, and you, Mr. AZ Billiard Poster and Facebook commentator have. He's got all the same problems. He struggles with his shot making. He struggles with pressure. He struggles with cue ball. He struggles in the face of daunting adversity. He's no different than you, and he's up there in front of everybody playing for a bunch of money against a guy that's just running 3 racks an inning, and he's trying to deal with that. And this is somehow he's managed to put his game together to the point where he can get to the finals of the VG10, to where he can win a Kremlin Open, where he can get on the Mosconi Cup, to where he can run 10 racks of 10 ball. And he's managed to put his game together where, despite his problems, he can turn an amazing pool. And so I recognize that I don't look at him as a shiny shirt pro with problems. I look at him as an ordinary guy that's done an amazing job building an extraordinary game. And so I just don't want people to be aware of the tendency to start flipping a switch and one thing in a shiny shirt, compare him to Perfect, and just roll your eyes. It's like, no, he's not perfect, but he's not an idiot. He's not an idiot for not assembling his game in a different way. I think I'm more amazed by how far he has come and what he's able to do. So here's my question to you. Last question about this match. I think this is an interesting one. I don't know the answer. I know the answer that when Jesus was when Tyler was winning a bunch of games. Well, I know that when Jesus came back and won a bunch of games, I know Tyler struggled. But is it a chicken or the egg that Jesus come back because Tyler was struggling, or was Tyler struggling because Jesus was coming back? When the lead swings changed, because there were a lot of swings in this match, when Tyler started rallying on day 3, and when Jesus was really rallying on day 2, why? Why did it go that way? Like, was it because Tyler, when these big swings were happening, Nate, why were those swings happening?
Well, of course, this is just conjecture at this point in time, but I mean, I honestly believe that I'm going to yawn. And because we're not editing, that's going to stay in, which is going to be fantastic. I honestly think that, not all misses are created equal, right? Like, you've been in a match and you've missed a shot before, and it was a silly one, or maybe it was a really, really tough shot, but what you left your opponent was a wide open pool table, and you kind of just think to yourself, crap, that one's going to hurt way worse than most do. And of course, this happens, of course, with the pros too, right? I mean, if you just ran a 6-pack on them or something like that, and then you missed a shot, and then maybe your opponent runs out that rack and then breaks and runs one more and then breaks dry, and you go up there and you don't run out a wide open table. That's your opponent was kind of starting to get into something. They probably were swinging the cue pretty well, but then they had an unfortunate situation. They gave it back to you. And your response to that was to give it back right away. You can kind of just think to yourself, oh, crap, this one's going to hurt more than normal. I can't go back to a specific game, but it probably was just the start of day 3. Tyler came in more mentally prepared to be ready to play top pool than Jesus did. And once Tyler got his opening, he was more mentally ready to take that charge and to really get himself out there to getting himself back into that match. And I think that, to be honest, I think it's more mental preparation than it is anything else, going from day 2 to day 3, being ready for the challenge, where Tyler was a little bit more than Jesus was, and that turned into catching up right away. That's my.
And I think you hit something here, because you're talking a little bit about we call that the momentum, right? And one thing you got me thinking about is they're at an interesting level where neither of them are at the level of the top tier, Phil or Shane, Chang, all these guys, but they are both phenomenal players to where, as I said, on day 3, they hit that gear. And so they can hit that elite gear, but their range is wide enough and the bottom of their range is still vulnerable. So when Shane and Chang play poorly, it looks different. They're still running out open tables a lot of the time. They can still run racks with a break, but maybe when Shane's dogging it, it just means that he's breaking and not getting a look at the one and losing the cue ball and having to kick or push out. And he's not stringing racks. He's just getting control of the table or having to push. Or maybe when Shane's dogging it, he just, he has to run up to a tough shot and then gets funny on it and has to play safe instead of running out. And it's not the same as when these guys are struggling, they can still struggle to run open racks because they're so what I'm saying is when you're watching top players like the absolute best of the world play, momentum plays a part for sure, but it just plays out differently where it doesn't look as pivotal because both players are playing good and running out racks. Whereas these guys are at the level where when they're playing good, they're running out lots of racks and looking like top pros. But then when they're struggling, they can still look a little vulnerable and patchy, kind of fumble away some opportunities a little bit more often. And so I think that momentum might play a bigger role in this level of match than it does in the top pros. I think that at the top level, both players tend to play pretty good. And anyway, so that's it. I think that momentum maybe played a bigger role in this match than it would have in a lot of races to 100.
Yeah, I think so. Well, why don't we leave it there because we're
cool. I'm good with that.
Yeah, we're pretty deep into the podcast at this point. We still have a lot more to talk about. So anybody who might be new to the podcast, of course, we have a VG10 event, so maybe we've been exposed to a lot of potential new listeners. Maybe you are one of those people that made your way over here and you're listening. We are normally... Do you need something? All right. Normally my cats aren't in my room, but apparently my cat's in here today, so... All right, anyways, we are normally not this quote-unquote unprofessional. I normally do a lot more work into these episodes, but I'm still trying to frantically get caught up with quote-unquote life from the event, so I'm going to put very little effort into producing and editing these podcasts, but really what I'm trying to get at here is we have structure to the podcast. So in the beginning, we have our normal just recap, talking about, things that have happened since the last time. That today was the Patreon updates, the VG10 prizes, and then the T-shirts, as well as the shout-outs. And then we go into what happened in the past week or since we did the last podcast. So it's a recap of everything that happened in the world of pool. At this point in time, we go into what's coming up in pool. So I guess I probably should have said this in the beginning, but I'll say it right here. There is normal structure to our podcast, so if you continue to listen to the podcast, you can start getting used to the format of the podcast. And
so now's the part we just hit 88 miles an hour in the DeLorean. Now we're going into the future.
Yes,
so let's. Like what does it look like? Does Biff have control of everything, and the police are arresting everybody? Okay, go ahead.
I have no idea what you're referencing, and I don't want to, Demetrius. We are going to talk about what's coming up, and there's been a lot of really big announcements, I guess, in the last basically week and a half. Of course, we're going to talk about Shane and Dennis because it starts today, which is October 23rd. We're going to talk about that one last. We'll talk very briefly about the other matchups that are coming up. And first off, I guess Tyler and Jesus has been announced the rematch already. I believe the dates on those is November 23rd, 4th, and 5th, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it 14th, 15th, 16th? Do you know that?
I didn't. I knew that they were having a rematch. I didn't catch one.
It's one of those. It's the same day, actually, as the Mika Immonen and Oscar Dominguez one-pocket matchup. If you know what that is. I believe that's the 14th and the 15th. Well, regardless, it's so far out in the future that we're going to have plenty of podcasts from now until then. But yes, Mika Immonen is playing a $10,000 one-pocket matchup against Oscar Dominguez. The rematch for Tyler and Jesus has been announced, as well as Tony Chohan and Scott Frost are playing a big one-pocket matchup as well. We are not going to talk about any of those in depth because we'll have actual episodes that will talk more in depth on those. But I wanted to say that they are happening, as well as I'm actually going to be doing a VG9 event for the ladies. So that is also coming up. I'll have more details on that one in the future. But I figured it'd be a good idea to announce it here so that you guys all know. Other than that, is there anything else that I missed that you can think of on the docket?
I mean, those are the ones I've got on my calendar.
Okay, perfect. So, yes. So I guess those are really what we wanted to talk about as far as the upcoming events. Now we can talk about the big one that starts tonight, which is going to be Shane versus Dennis. 9 on the spot, 9 ball, race to 120 over 3 days. Well, start it out.
What an awesome match! I'm super excited. I mean, this is what I really want to see, because if they play 10 ball, Dennis just can't get there. I mean, Shane's break advantage is just too much. Last time they played, for those that don't know, they raced to 120. Shane won 100 to 85. I mean, that's winning basically 5-3, and maybe that's not as lopsided because you give him credit for the fact that he was up so much that maybe it affects Dennis to know that he's out of the match. But anyway, the point is now they're playing 9 ball 9 on the spot, and what an interesting matchup that is, because that's been around long enough now. It's been around 3, 4, 5 years, 9 on the spot, maybe even longer. But but it's really gotten big in the last 4 years, I'd say, is the 9 on the spot has become the main thing, and these players. And so, again, the break, whenever we talk about these matches, we have to immediately go to the break, because they both play – the break is just going to play a critical role in any pool match. And they're playing, from what I understand, on normal-sized pockets. It's not like anything super tricked out. They're not playing at hard times. So they're playing 9 ball. So there's going to be a lot of racks run and a lot of open racks run. And so – one question to ask is who's got the breaking edge, and that's actually one of the most important questions to ask. But then the other question to ask, of course, is, break aside, who is playing hot and better prepared to deliver a high-quality game here? So those, I'll just start by saying, I think those are the two main questions. Like, who's ready to deliver? They both play great. Who's really ready to play their best and be hungry and motivated and ready to strike? And then how does the break edge shake out? So what are your thoughts? Do you agree that those are kind of the two questions, or is there another angle I'm missing here?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, of course, you can go into the angle of who's ready for the match. I think Shane is a consummate professional. I don't think he'd take the match. I don't think Shane at this point in his career would take any match he doesn't feel like he's going to be the lock favorite to take. So the whole Shane's been fishing for the last 6 months kind of gets thrown out the window when you know how professional he is and how, kind of nitty's like a really disrespectful way of putting it, but like he doesn't need it, right? I mean, he's financially well off, he's financially decent. He doesn't need to take these matchups. So the only way he's going to take it is if he feels like he's basically a lock to win. So that's not necessarily being a nit, and it's more about like, well, do I really need to take this match? Do I really want to change what I'm doing in my lifestyle right now? But I mean,
I think that's a really, really, really important point, because for those that aren't really tuned in, like, Dennis has been playing a lot of action matches, and the word of the street is that Dennis is playing as good as he's ever played. He's playing as good of 9 ball as anyone's ever played. That he beat Sky Woodward in this format, which doesn't sound that devastating, but the way he did it was stunning. And he's been hungry, and he's lost to Shane a number of times in these types of formats, and he's definitely motivated to win this one. And he's playing the best pool of his life, and now he's got him to where Shane doesn't get that dominant 10 ball break advantage, and he's like, now I've got you, you son of a, you know what? And so that's where Dennis is coming. He's hungry, and he's finally got his chance, and he wants nothing more in his life. Like, his career goal is to just make Shane's 3 days as miserable possible. And he sees Shane a little bit, fishing and maybe not quite as motivated, and he feels like, this is my chance. This is my chance. Like, trust me, Dennis is hungry. So in light of that, it's everyone knows that Dennis is going to play good, and he's going to be really ready to go. And then there has been kind of this feeling that Shane has lost his fire. He's been fishing. He's a little bit like, half retired. And so I think you bring up a really good point, which is Shane, there's not a lot of love between these two guys, and Shane is not going to get in the ring to get tortured for 3 days by someone like that, by Dennis. So if he's getting in the ring, he must be physically, mentally ready and determined, or he wouldn't be taking this match. So I'm not saying he's going to be as prepared as Dennis, because Dennis is hitting him great, but it would be a mistake to think that Shane's just going to show up and, go be like, shrug, I guess I wasn't ready. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that is for the people who do like Dennis in this matchup, which we're going to talk about here in a couple seconds. I mean, for the people who like Dennis, that's kind of what their narrative is. Well, how can somebody who just got off the lake last week be ready to play maybe the best gambler in the history of pool? And it's I don't like that narrative, because it's just completely disrespectful to Shane, and it just goes against everything that he's done in the last 5 to 10 years. He hasn't booked a loser since 1924, and that always gives me cause to pause when it comes to discussing these events, or I guess these matchups. And I guess that's kind of the last narrative that I see here is Shane taking this because of some sort of personal animus that he just wants to kind of rub Dennis's nose in it one last time, or at least one more time, or is, and that's kind of clouding his judgment on whether or not he thinks he can win, or is this really just Shane having so much confidence and feeling like he's getting another sweet payday and he's going to go buy a new boat or something? It's that's kind of how I'm looking at this match as well.
Yeah, and then as far as the break, it's a really interesting one. Obviously, Dennis, I have not gotten to see either of these people break too often playing 9 on the spot. But I will tell you this. I think that Shane is going to outbreak Dennis anyway. And just because I know a little bit about the break in terms of my struggles and my successes, is that it may be alien to 10 ball. But if you show me, it would be like saying this. If you show me a guy like Filler versus a guy that's like not, like, I'll just take me, like a guy that's not the same level of ball striker. If we went and played snooker, it's a different game. Do you think that he's not going to have a shot making edge? Even if we went to whether it's Chinese 8-ball or whether we went and played bar pool, like whatever game we pick, Filler's going to have a better firepower than me, because yeah, it's a different game, but it's still, like what they said in The Hustler, it's a ball, some sticks. Whatever. And I feel the same way about breaking. Yes, it's a different break. It's not that full hit pop and stop. It's a cut break with a different hit on the cue ball, but it still involves a different timing, a different swing, a different feel for how to maneuver the rack and how to massage the rack and make the balls track certain ways. And that I believe that Shane has a better feel for the timing of the break and for how to kind of make balls follow certain tracks and get them to open up the right way. And he has such, like, I would think that Shane's feelings, like, this is an emotional thing, but like if you ask Shane how he feels about the break, when Shane thinks about the break, he has warm butterfly feelings where he's thought about how much money he's made and how many U.S. Open titles he has, and he just thinks about all the success he's had because he's developed his breaking skills so high. So when he thinks about the break, he thinks that is the shot that has allowed me to dominate my competition and be tremendously successful. And if you've asked Dennis about the break, instead of warm butterfly feelings and all these positive memories, he thinks like, this is the part where I've been kind of shackled, and this is the part where I've lost and have been frustrated, and it's cost me matches and it put me through torture, and this is the hill that's, so it's like they just have different feelings about the break, and they have different outlooks about the break and different likes or dislikes. And so I don't care how good Dennis is striking the break. I don't care. I think when push comes to shove, the break is still going to play a critical role. Shane, I think he has more positive energy and more breaking ability than Dennis. And even though it's a weird breaking game, I still have a feeling that Shane's going to outbreak him and it's going to play a big role in this match.
Yeah, I mean, now we're actually starting to jump into some of the analysis of this, and of course, the break is not worthless, right? I mean, useless, whatever you want to say. This matchup makes me very, very nervous. The last one didn't. When they played the last time, it was kind of whatever. Shane is going to make a ball in 10 ball. He's going to. He's going to break dry one out of every. If he's hitting them bad, he'll one out of every 15 to 20 racks. If he's hitting them good, one out of every 50. If Shane is hitting the 9 ball rack well, he's going to be making a ball one out of every 10 times. But if Dennis is hitting the balls bad, or I should say, if Shane is hitting the balls bad in this format of 9 ball, he's going to be making a ball about one out of every, he's going to be missing the rack one out of every 10 times, something like that. But I don't think Dennis is going to be, if Dennis is hitting them bad, he's probably only going to be like one out of every 7, maybe 6. Where if Dennis is hitting the 10 ball rack bad, he's going to break dry 20, 30%. And that's a huge edge, I think that is a huge edge towards Shane, because his 10 ball break is so much better than Dennis's. And I don't think that even his best version of his 9 ball break is going to be that much better than Dennis. And I don't think you're going to argue that Dennis shoots the balls less, or that Shane shoots the ball straighter than Dennis. So,
well, there's two things. So you brought up the break, so let's talk about it. I agree that Shane's not going to have the same edge as he would in a 10-ball match. That's why this match is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm saying that the break is still going to play a role. I still think Shane's, like that cut break, listen, it takes a lot of accuracy, both to make the one on the side, to control the 2 ball, and to control the cue ball.
Correct.
When you're cutting it too much, the cue ball goes to the side rail and then down by the end rail and gets behind all those balls in the rack area, or leaves you some length of the table shot, elevated off the end rail. And when you're hitting them too full, you're either drawing into the side, or you're drawing the cue ball cross side, or you're drawing it cross corner. So it's like, and you're not getting the 1 ball. And so it's like, and you don't get the right spread. So the break shot, it's still really, really important. Now, when you put Dennis, I've seen matches where they put Dennis on a 1 on the spot 9 ball with a magic rack, or even with just a triangle rack where he gets a dick wing ball, and all of a sudden the guy's running like a million racks of 9 ball and nobody in the world can beat him. And so if you allow Dennis to get the break to where it's totally solved, like it's just medium speed, smooth into the rack, make the wing balls float them apart, well, then nobody's got a breaking edge. But I think that there's enough skill and difficulty in the cut break with a 9 on the spot. I think that Shane's going to have a striking edge of the break, and I do think it's going to play a big difference, because then you ask me the question of who runs the balls out better, and there's not much of a difference. And I feel that I think Dennis plays better after the break when there's like, let's talk about the momentum we were just talking about. When the momentum is stalled out, when neither player is in rhythm, when both players are kind of like, they just had some patchy games, they both missed twice the last rack, and nobody's really playing really well right now, and maybe it's been a couple of patchy racks and a couple of clusters and some kicking and some back scratching, and now I think that void of momentum, when it's a grind, I think Dennis grinds better. But when it comes to who hits a higher, and I'm not saying Dennis shouldn't hit a higher gear. Dennis hits these amazing gears too. But I think what I'm saying is that Shane tends to be a gear player where he doesn't necessarily grind as hard, but he just hits these big rhythms where once he's got the momentum, he can just run a lot of racks and it carries him. He runs a lot of racks in a row. He might make a few errors when he's struggling, but then he hits these big gears. And I think Dennis grinds better than Shane. So then the reason that's important is if they were breaking poorly, and if it's a lot of breaking, if they were breaking dry, getting hooked on the 1, having a lot of push-outs and safety battles, balls are tying up funny, if that's the way it went, like, I don't think Shane would really win this match. But if it becomes a thing where they're both breaking and Shane's breaking more effectively and getting a lot of open looks at the 1 ball, like, I just think that Shane could catch a big gear. So I do think that Shane outgears Dennis, but it's questionable. Dennis has a pretty darn big gear. We saw that against Sky.
Yeah, and this is where the disconnect is between you and I. I'm not disagreeing with a lot of the things you said. I think you're overvaluing Shane's abilities to pocket balls. I think that Dennis has about the same gap between his abilities to shoot the balls out, play the right pattern, stuff like that, than Shane has in this 9 ball break. 10 ball break, don't even,
Different game. Yeah.
Shane. Yeah. Shane twice on Sundays, right? But this with this kind of unique breaking style, I don't think that the edge is that much bigger. That it definitely exists between Shane and Dennis, but I don't think it's quite as prevalent as anything else. And I do think that Dennis's running out or just shooting of the balls, his cueing of the balls is better than Shane's, especially given the fact that Shane's been on a lake and Dennis has been on the table for the last 6 months. And I don't say that like Shane's not ready for the match or he's not in stroke. I don't mean it that way. I mean it in a sense of Dennis has been playing pool and getting better for the last 6 months. Like you said, he's shooting the ball straighter than he probably ever has. And I think between Shane just kind of treading water, so to speak, and Dennis getting a little bit better, I think that gap has gotten a little bit bigger still. So I don't disagree. I think that's why this is one of the most exciting matches I've seen, because in the end, you got to realize that their Fargo rates are almost identical, and that's including Shane's break. So if Dennis doesn't have to, say it another way, if I wanted to argue on the half of Dennis doesn't even have to close the breaking edge, because their Fargo rates are the same with Shane having had a dominant break in 10 ball and traditional 9 ball. And so if he can close the gap, and to make it where it's just not, and we already know that just going to 9 of the spot 9 balls already closing that gap. And then he's playing good and striking the balls well, and he's putting a lot of work on the break. He doesn't even have to match Shane's break. If he just keeps it somewhat close, he's probably playing better. He's probably playing better after the break in a lot of situations, So it's going to be it's going to come down to, can Shane break so well that he catches such big gears that he puts a ton of pressure on Dennis's break to where Dennis starts, like, I know what it means to feel like, that's what I'm talking about with the pressure in the VG10 and 10,000 pounds of pressure on your break. When you know that you have to be able to break this rack effectively, and that all your work in your entire career is going to be for naught, and you're going to have the 3 worst days of your life and get completely tortured if you can't find a way to break these balls right now, it's going to be so much pressure on Dennis's break that if he can handle it and breaks well, and then he can make it about running the balls and shooting the balls and who's prepared and who's shooting straight, and Shane might not win. But if Shane can play well and break well and play his game, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Dennis's break. And I really feel like the match is going to come down to not how Shane breaks. I think the match is going to come down to how well Dennis breaks the balls and how he responds to having that much pressure on that piece of the game where he's been vulnerable in the past. And I think that if Dennis breaks effectively, it's going to be very hard for Shane to win. Yeah, and I look at this the complete opposite way.
Okay.
But for the exact reasons that we had just talked about, I think Dennis's break is going to be Dennis's break. I mean, like you said, Dennis got to the same level as Fargo as Shane with that break. So I mean, I just don't see how that's going to change or be a big variable at this point in time in his career. It is what it is. I think the biggest question mark on whether or not Shane's going to win this match is whether or not Shane is shooting the ball straight. His break, I'm giving his break as a consistent. It's going to be there in the same way that I'm doing with Dennis's break. I think this is literally going to come down to, is Shane at that highest caliber of his game the last time that we saw him? And that wasn't the highest his game has ever been the last time we saw him. But is it going to be high enough the last time that they played each other? Shane was getting out from pretty muchly everywhere, right? So is Shane going to be able to do that consistently enough to be able to put this match away? I don't think that there's anything that Dennis can do or not do really to win or lose this match. I believe that this match is completely in the hands of Shane, and whether or not,
but I think these are different sides of the same coin. I'll put it this way.
It is.
If Shane plays his game and plays the way that Shane can and is breaking well and is shooting straight and is putting that much heat on Dennis is going to have a hard time breaking well. But listen, if Dennis is breaking well and playing his game and running a lot of racks, I don't know that Shane's going to be able to play his top game, because Shane playing his top game is going to put too much heat on Dennis's break. But Dennis breaking the balls well and then playing well after the break, I don't think you're going to see Shane hit the same gears, because he's not used to being in that big of a dogfight. He's used to being the front runner, thoroughbred. And if Dennis is breaking well, then I don't think Shane's going to have the chances he's going to like to really be freewheeling and hitting his high gear. So I think it's going to be a battle of Shane trying to hit his high gear versus Dennis breaking well enough
Yeah.
to make it enough of a fight to where he doesn't let Shane hit that gear.
And that's exactly where I am too. But I think that I just think that Dennis's break is going to be what it is. I think that he's going to hit it because he doesn't have the wild swings that Shane does with his shooting. Really, I think Dennis's break is Dennis's break, and I just don't see the big. Even when he was playing against Sky from start to finish, his break was his break. He was hitting him pretty good the whole time, but not great. But
he was also winning the match.
Exactly.
He's facing a different level of pressure on his break.
Of course,
he could break bad and still beat Sky to some extent, but now I'm telling you, it's going to be a lot of pressure on Dennis's break. So we both see it pretty similar. You feel that Dennis is going to break you feel that Dennis's break is the constant and that Shane's play is going to be the variable. I feel like Shane's play is tied to Dennis's break, and I think they're both variable. Who's going to win this match? Who do you like in this match?
Man, and I don't like this. I know that you put a bet on it for us, and I'm happy to sweat anything. I mean, I think it's fun to sweat something. What it's going to come down to is I'm not betting against Shane's confidence. So I know where Shane is in his career right now. I know where his mindset is, and I know he's not gonna come off the lake and he's not gonna start hitting balls again for a reason for no reason, right? If he thought he's not gonna jump off the lake after being on there for 8 months to hand over $10,000 to Dennis, right? He's jumping off the lake because he thinks that he's basically guaranteeing himself X amount of dollars, whatever it is. I'm not actually sure what the bet is. I probably should know that, but he's not gonna jump off the lake for no reason. There's gonna have to be a pretty damn good reason for him to want to jump off the lake to prepare for this match, because it's not a 1 day thing. It's a 4 to 6 week, probably about 4 weeks really to get ready for this match. And at the end of the day, I'm betting strictly. Right, I guess I shouldn't say I'm betting. I guess I am betting because you're betting and I'm betting with you. But really, I'm making my prediction based off of the way that I know Shane to be at this point in his career. And I got to say Shane's going to win the match 120 to 108, something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because, Shane's obviously got a ton of experience in long sets. He knows how to win these matches, and he's got a lot of confidence playing Dennis. I feel that, to your point, I think that Dennis might – it's not – forget about who's prepared, but let's think about who would accept a match that's a little bit more dicey. I think Dennis would accept a match where he's not sure he's going to win because he wants a shot at Shane, whereas I don't think Shane's going to accept a match where he thinks he can lose because he doesn't want to – I think Dennis is more willing to expose himself to take a shot than Shane is right now. So just on that, that's kind of what you're talking about. And I do think in this match, I can't say it enough. I think the break is I know we've talked about it a million times, but I really do think that that's going to be a big difference. I think this match could go either way. I think that's what makes this one of the most exciting matches I've seen. Dennis has made it his life goal to beat Shane in a long race, and this is his best opportunity, and he's really prepared, and he's got the break as neutralized as he's ever going to have it. So it's pretty scary, but I'm going to bet on Shane also for the reason I told you my strategy about how I'm going to bet on Shane every match until he finally loses one. I've been betting on Shane for over 12 years, and I've gotten paid off every time. So until I have to pay off a bet, I'm going to keep betting on Shane. But I definitely am excited, really, really, really excited to see this. And I like your scoreline, 120 to 108. I'll go the over. I think it's 120 to, I'd have to take the under on Dennis. 120 to, I don't know, 103, but yeah, I would, and it might not, it might even be a nail biter. It might be 7-8 games at the end, but I think he wins. I think Shane wins the match, but we bet small. To be fair, we're betting small on this, and when we get into the Tony and Scott, that's where I'm going to be betting big. So
yeah. So I think we can leave this discussion there. Of course, it's starting up pretty soon, so it's currently 11:14 Central American time. So I believe it starts in maybe about 7 hours, something like that.
That'll be fun, man. I can't wait.
Yeah. So, I guess we wanted to get a podcast out this week before this match, and I guess we're going to now. So, we can leave this there and we can move on. We're at a pretty high amount of time. Normally we have beautiful segments and everything's great and grand and dandy, but like I said, I'm not doing too much to this so that I can get it out as ASAP. If you're super against this as a listener, like you want more structure and you want more like segments and stuff like that, please reach out and let me know. Because to be honest, I'm kind of falling in love with like the way that I do these things. It's so much less work and it's so much easier for me. And it probably would be easier to even get a little bit more content out if I spent half as much time doing a lot of the work into these podcasts. So
I like it, man. I like the, just kind of more natural more conversation where we had some agendas of what we're going to talk about, and then we just cover them until we say what we want to say and we keep moving on. And I think we hit what we wanted to hit today, and we've got some good matches coming up, some other things we can look forward to. But by keeping it simple to put out, then there's not as much inertia to overcome to get on the phone again next week and knock another one out.
Yeah, and we do have some listener questions. I do have a decent amount of those, but we don't have them. I guess we're not going to do one right now. We're not. We'll probably do one next week or something like that because we'll have less things to talk about. But we're not going to do one of those right now. I think this is probably a pretty good spot for the podcast.
I think we just had to get the ball rolling again. So,
yeah, I think so too. I'm not sure. I guess there's really nothing else I have. I guess I really, really, really do appreciate everybody. I do want to take one little moment here to kind of talk. So if you don't mind, Demetrius.
Send it.
So if you've been around the podcast for a long time, you know that I have been trying to find some sort of some motive to financially support myself enough to be able to do this more as a full-time thing. And it's less about like, oh my goodness, I'm just trying to not get a job and be a lazy pool player. It's less about that, and it's more about if I can toot my own horn a little bit. I see that the impact that I can have on the industry, and I see the things that I'm doing, and I think in my mind that I feel like I'm making a difference in the industry as far as getting some really cool stuff out, really cool content, entertaining stuff that people want to consume. And that was shown by just the finals of the VG10 alone. That was viewed by like 85 or 87,000 people the last time I saw it. And I really feel like if I'm able to do a couple of the big ideas that I have in the industry and really try to, I guess, grow this game 110%, that I have a chance at being able to really make a difference. Whether or not that's true, I don't really know if it's true in the long run.
Well, let me jump in on that because I'll tell you, this is, and I'm speaking to the listeners now, so you don't have to listen to this, but Nate is understating this, and I don't. These events that he's run, people know that running a tournament is tough, but when you have a tournament where everybody's in the same place at the same time, it's already challenging. To do what Nate did with the lack of tournament director experience, and it's not a shot, that's a compliment, because you just put this thing together, and I will tell you, Nate is extremely. It just took. It took a bunch of things. I mean, he's a very, very, very sharp. He is very, very, very he knows the game of pool, both from the player side and from the director side. And he's able to organize and manage and bring people together. And for him to manage every piece of this and to take something, the biggest thing is to be able to have a vision and then turn that vision into an actual reality and then to put in the amount of energy, not just in terms of time and effort, but also in terms of like just will and willing something out of the universe, like everything he did, and to realize that he navigated languages, time zones, herding cats, and also technology and just the fact that this hasn't been done before. So everything was new. He was the one that had to figure out what type of player agreements to put together and email out to people and what type of, the rule, just putting together the rule PDF and the organization and the schedules and all these things and the social media. I mean, for him to will that out of the universe, with the novelty of that format and the experience level he had, it's only going to get better, guys. Like, he is just carving this path. It's like the first person to hack through that jungle. and he hacked his way through that jungle and got there. And it's like this guy, he wants to bring things to the players, but also to the people that want to see great pool. And he's looking at bringing amazing things to pool. So if we can allow him, all we have to do is we just have to give him the opportunity to turn his energy towards building a pool future for all of us. And I really feel that way. Let's just give him the chance. He's willing to hack through the jungle. We just need to pass him the knife.
Yeah. And well, first off, I'm blushing. That's really, really sweet of you. Of course. All right. So there are a lot of things, yes, that I'm trying to figure out on the fly. And that's, I guess, kind of the nature of what I work with is I never really learned how to do a podcast until I started doing it, and then I just kind of jumped in and did it. If you've been around since the beginning, you've known how bad it was in the beginning, and I would like to think it's getting better. Who knows? But anyways, what I really the point of all of this right here, and this might be a little bit sad to some of the people that are listening, especially if you've been listening for a long time. What I found out was the podcast, it just was not ever going to be financially sustainable enough to be able to really make it work as far as, I guess, doing full time, which is why I started going into some of the events. Now, the podcast is not going away. You don't have to worry about that. We're still going to do this. But in the pecking order of how the podcast works, it's going to now have to take a back seat to the other projects that I will be working on. And if those don't work, if the other projects that I think that those are going to be more sustainable financially to be able to get me to the point where I could do this as a 100% full-time job. And I've been saying that for like a year and a half, and I haven't had a job for a year and a half. So I guess it's already to the point where I guess I'm able to scrap a living out. But wifey wants a house, and at some point in time, we're going to have to start working towards that. So it's going to switch between survival, and it's going to switch into actually advancement. Right now,
well, and there's something I want to, so I've been doing these boot camps, Nate, as you know, and I went full time just in end of January this year, and it was really strange because I love to do boot camps. I love to train pool, right? And if I was independently wealthy, I would just work with everybody for free and just answer questions and answer emails, and they could send me videos and I review them, and we could get together and hang out at a pool hall, and I could show them shots and we could break down their game. The problem is that if I don't charge any money, and I had this because I had a youth player whose dad reached out to me and wanted me to help him with their youth player, and it's like I felt terrible, like I wanted to do it for free, like, oh, youth player, let's give back, but it's like, here's what ends up happening. Is that if I tell people, like if I were to be like, yeah, you know what, they're a kid, let me help the kid out a little bit. Well, then what happens is I get together with them once and help them out, and then my calendar is completely covered, and I've got all these trainings, and I don't have time for them because I'm training 3 days here, 3 days here, 3 days here, all this stuff. And it's like, man, when do I fit in anything else? And so it's like good intention, but then if I don't, so what I realized, if I don't charge money, it just ends up being good intention. And my dad always said the road to hell is paved with good intention. It's like people, I could sit here and have all these things that I wish I could give to the pool world, but if I'm having to show up and work a corporate job and then manage my own pool game, I just don't really have any time left over to really do much for anybody. And so what I've learned is it's been hard because I wish I could just give, but I have to bring it by bringing in money for my boot camps. Then I'm able to not have a corporate job where I have time then to spend 3 days with a bunch of players and help them with their pool games. And with you, what I would say is like, if, and people vote with their wallets, like if people want content, then they need to help people have the opportunity to create that content. And so if they, that's it. And so it really is important. And I know it's weird to like take money for doing something that we're passionate about, we love, but in the end, if we don't, then we don't have the opportunity to put stuff together that people are going to enjoy. So it's like, it's kind of weird. It's like probably like the first time an artist sells a work of art, they're like, man, this is weird, but in the end, you want to create amazing content for players to watch and enjoy. And all we have to do is give you you're like an artist. All we have to do is give you the opportunity and you'll do it. So is the way people vote. It's if people tune in on these events,
Well, let me jump in.
Yeah, then it's like,
because,
go ahead.
Yeah, because of course, I was trying to do it with the Patreon system, and of course that doesn't necessarily work, because of course you're going to have some people that want to support it just because they do want that content like you're talking about. But there is this sense of, well, what am I getting for my investment? And sometimes, content every week doesn't really make sense when you get it for free no matter what. So I completely get that, and I completely understand that. So the idea is I need to get more creative at that point in time. And that's really where I'm going with this, is I'm going to be doing a little bit more of these events, these virtual events. Of course, I did the East vs. West, which had the three co-brothers and Kelly Fisher, Dennis Grabe, Alex Kazakis, Wyszczek, and then Chris Melling. I'm going to be doing more events like that, more fun events. But the idea for the people who, why would you pay for something that you can get for free? I completely understand that, and I'm a little bit of the same way. I just finally became a Patreon to my own podcast that I've been listening to for over 3.5 years. I just finally became a Patreon to support what they do. And I get that's a really weird thing and a really hard thing to go over there and do. So to ask other people to do it out, really push them to do it, it's just, it doesn't make sense. And I'm not trying to do that. Really what this is about is I'm going to try to find new ways of trying to create a sustainable living. And one of those things is going to be these events. Now, this turned into a really long rant at this point, but what I really was on this venture to say is the podcast is going to be taking a back seat whenever we do these events. So if I have, a 1 or 2 week long event like the VG10, Demetrius and I might not be able to jump on and do a podcast for those 2 weeks. Of course, that's not ideal, but as I get better, maybe I get more prepared, I get more organized. I know that Kyle Boutte said that he was going to do something that'll really actually help me out a lot on the back end, because even if we go live for 7 hours on these the qualifying pools, I still usually have another 6 hours of work, both 3 hours before, 3 hours afterwards before the event. And what he said is he has something that might make that a lot easier for me. So that might be good. But the idea is there's not a lot of time to be able to really do anything else during these events. And I just hope that the listeners of the podcast kind of understand that. I still have a wife that wants to see me every now and then, not through a comment
and
feed
it's no different. It's no different than if you had it's no different than if you had a corporate job where you had to go for 4 days and some other out of town social training thing and annual get together. Like there's times when work calls and for you have to respond to work, whether your work is running events or doing something else. Yeah. And what I do think, I have some ideas of things we could do, because I would like to see the podcast come out, if not every week, pretty regularly. I don't want to lose our listeners or lose their engagement, and I want to provide for them. I've got some ideas we could talk about offline. But in the meantime, what I'd love to see is, I know you don't want to push the listeners. And so I'm not, it's your podcast. I'm just kind of, hanging out. But I'll tell the listeners, I would love to see, even if it's like you said, even if it's $1 or $2, I'd love to see everyone just break through and contribute, if nothing else, just to show there's financial support, and then there's emotional support. And if we can get enough people to just send in comments and say, yes, I'd like this to continue to be regular. Here's, $5-10 a month or whatever, just to help out. I think that would go a long way to keep this, as I don't want to see this take a back seat. And so I don't, I'm not looking for people to go broke here, but let's just rally this thing back to where we keep this thing on the forefront. And I want you to run these big events, and then we can talk about some ways to satisfy the listeners while you're doing that too. So,
yeah, of course, that's ultimately the goal. I have honest intentions. That's why I always, everything that I do is basically see-through. I just want to be able to help this game. So, I guess really that turned into be a big long conversation that I wasn't necessarily intending it to be. But that's okay.
But it's fair. I think it's in the name of transparency. I think it's good that the listeners know where we're at, where we're trying to go, what the challenges are. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and really what I was trying to get out of that was, this is my next attempt at doing this industry and helping this industry in the long run, and because of that. My next attempt at helping the industry, this I've kind of ran the podcast thing and tried that out, and it hasn't quite worked. Of course, we have a lot of very, very, very generous Patreon supporters, and I create a great relationship with them. I would like to think so, anyways. I talk with them pretty regularly. They're great people, and at the end of the day, I guess I think I've exhausted that one, and it just isn't going to be quite enough. It's not going to work.
Right. Again, I know that you've already said this, but you're not You're not stopping the podcast. What you're saying is a podcast only model doesn't scale.
Yes, exactly.
You need to go to a podcast /
events,
event promotion.
Whatever,
yeah. Or some other. There has to be a different medley, and that the podcast will always be a part of that. And that if we have enough support for the podcast, it'll always be a steady part of that. It just can't. And it wouldn't be fair to the listeners to try to make this a solo podcast, because then it puts too much pressure on the listeners, and we don't want to do that. So,
well, yeah. I mean, the podcast is it's where I started, right? It's what got me introduced to really being a promoter of this game. If somehow tomorrow Jeff Bezos reaches out and says, "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast. It's awesome. Let me give you $10,000 a month to do this podcast." I still might do the events, but to be honest, it would be podcasts 3 or 4 times a week, and I'd be talking to anybody and everything. The funniest part about this was Mike Howerton, when I first started doing the podcast, he's like, "How are you going to do 3 podcasts a week? There's no possible way that there's that much content out there." And after about 8 months of doing that, of 3 podcasts a week, he's like, "Are you running out yet?" And I showed him the list of people that I have, and I still actually have this list. But of course, I haven't gotten around to doing it, because then it started getting a little bit more crazy with. I started venturing out into doing more things, because I just kind of realized at that point in time that like you said, the podcast only wasn't going to be sustainable. So I started branching out at that point. But I have a list of about 75 people in the industry. Some of them were time sensitive, some of them weren't. But I have like 75 people that I was going to reach out to get on a podcast. I still have that list. So it's like there is so much content out there, and I've made such great connections along the way that there's a lot of stuff out there that we can really talk about. But I mean, I guess at this point in time, we're really just rambling about random stuff. And if you
it's good, man, and it's good. And I think that we're good. I've got some things I want to talk to you about offline, but as far as the podcast, I think we did well as far as catching up and covering the big up and coming thing. I think we need to log off and let everybody get ready to buy that pay-per-view and check out Shane and Dennis. And I'm smiling, man. This is about as good as my life gets, is watching a match like this. So
yeah, this is going to be a really, really good one. If you made it to this point in the podcast through all that ranting, you're a true super fan. You guys are the best. We really appreciate your support along the way. Sometimes, like I said, just a rating and a review on iTunes or something like that, which actually I do want to read one more of those, because I actually had a new one, so I'm not reading old ones. There's a new one that came in, so I do want to give a reading for that one.
Is it from that troll? The what's his name? The guy that starts with a W. What's his name?
I think his name's Wombat or something like that. Yeah,
Wombat. Whatever his name is. Is it from Wombat?
Yeah, he's pretty close to getting banned. I mean, I gave him a shout. I gave him a shout out last weekend because I thought it was funny. But I think I'm just gonna block him pretty soon. He's kind of an idiot. Okay, so here it is. So this is from JDH 1975. Don't know who that is. Very entertaining, very informative. Great podcast. If you absolutely love the game like I do and want to get better, you need to listen. My only complaint is I wish there were more shows and the shows were longer and there was more. I wish the shows were longer and there were more of them. Gonna miss the Coach's Corner. Pool Boot Camp is definitely in my future. Of course, I had to say that one because you were on that one too.
Woot.
There's another one that I think I've already read this one, but I think I did. But I'll say it again. This is from Ahmedman. The podcast is a great resource for all who want, who just can't get enough of the game. It's hard to play, practice, or watch pool at work, but this podcast gets me my fix. So those were the new updates. Of course, we really appreciate those. They get. Every time you rate and review the podcast, it gets out into people's feeds more often. And the fun part about this is when people ask me now, like, hey, how do I find the podcast? And I just, take their phone and I show them how to get to it. All I do is I've been kind of messing around and seeing what I can basically get with as far as the search algorithm. And now I'm to the point where if you search pool podcasts, it actually is the first one that comes up. It also comes up when you just search pool. So the ratings and reviews have absolutely worked. They are starting to get, they're starting to show up in actual searches, and it's going pretty well. So that's pretty cool. All right.
I want to get to the point where when somebody goes to Google, that they could just type the letter C and it cue it up podcast. Can we do that? Can we all work together? Okay, we're definitely expired. Let's just call it a day.
I think so. Yeah. All right. Appreciate everybody out there, of course. Sorry it's been so long. Demetrius and I are going to be in your feeds at least twice in the next week because, of course, we're going to talk about the conclusion of the Dennis and Shane matchup. And I have 2 more podcasts being planned right now with other people in the industry. So we should have about 4 podcasts, I believe, in the next 2 weeks or so. So try to make up for some of the missed time. Other than that, Demetrius, thanks again for joining me, and I guess we'll be chatting. I'm sure we'll probably be watching part of the match together, so I'll see you then.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. If you've liked what you've heard and you want to contribute to the future content that will be made, consider joining the podcast's Patreon at www.patreon.com/QItUp. Becoming a Patreon of the podcast will help to create all of the future content that the podcast will have. Special shout out to Dave Peters, Aaron Taylor, Pete Silsby, Morgan Lupton, Ben Young, Robert Miller, Andy Morse, and Bill Pelham for your generous contributions to the podcast's Patreon. If you ever need any more information on what the Patreon system is, or how you can contribute outside of the Patreon, please reach out to the podcast or Nate himself. If you would like to contribute to the podcast for free, consider sharing any podcasts or the podcast page on Facebook itself. Also, leaving a review and a rating if you listen through iTunes. It helps others find the podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Cue It Up podcast.